You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
Episode 143, The Paradox.
Welcome to The Paradox with your attending, Dr. Eric Larson. He is a practicing anesthesiologist and clinical assistant professor at Michigan State University College of Human Medicine. Listen in as he takes you behind the scenes of what practicing medicine in today's ever-changing world is like with another doctor. The Paradox is a fun and accidentally informative show for physicians, patients, or anyone who has ever found themselves in a waiting room.
Welcome to The Paradox. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Larson. Thank you for joining me as we explore the U.S. medical system in a fun and informative format through expert analysis. And today's expert is Dr. David Graham. Dr. Graham joins me again. Just as a reminder, he's an infectious disease physician in Billings, Montana, and he's the one I interviewed back in episode 86, back in April of 2020, where essentially we laid out exactly what's going to happen, and not surprisingly, or maybe surprisingly, exactly what we laid out has happened. The course of the disease, the SARS-CoV-2, the infection, its evolution, treatment, has panned out exactly the way we expected. The policy reactions are nonsensical, as we've seen many ways, and we'll get into in good detail in this conversation. Dr. Graham is also the author of the book From Killer to Common Cold, Herd Protection and the Transitional Phase of COVID-19, which he published about a year ago now, and it lays out exactly what's going on. The evolution of the virus, why we think the virus is going to behave the way we think it is, and the way it has been behaving, the fact that we won't be able to get rid of this, and that everyone will get infected, the fact that vaccines will be mildly effective in the sense that they're going to prevent you from getting to the hospital, but they won't provide complete immunity in order to keep you from getting infected with the virus and actually spread to other people. These are all things we talked about a year ago. We're going to go into policy choices, masks, vaccines, and basically the general state of COVID in the United States, and really in some ways the entire world. It's a great conversation. It's going to reiterate that you just need to look at this from a different angle. And the way that people have generally been looking at this is either hysteria or a reaction to the hysteria. And it is not healthy. It's not helpful. And it puts us in a position where we're not able to make rational decisions and have a policy that actually makes sense in the sense that you know where you're going to end up. Clearly with this virus, by now, if you do not believe it, I'm not sure if you're not paying attention, or you're certainly not listening to this show enough. But if you have been paying attention, absolutely 100%, you will get infected with SARS-CoV-2. Probably a number of times in your life, depending how long you're going to be here. Whether you get vaccinated, whether you've been infected once before, it is pretty clear that immunity is not lifelong in the sense that it will prevent you from getting infected. Likely, you'll get infected, but have more mild disease as you get older with multiple infections. That's just the nature of coronaviruses, and that's certainly the nature of this one. There's no reason to think that mitigation efforts in order to stop it, the spread, make any sense at this point, because everybody who can get vaccinated, who wants protection, can get it, except children. So I suppose you could maybe make an argument that you would need to protect children from getting this COVID-19, but we have shown pretty thoroughly, I think, throughout the entire world, with almost any mitigation procedure used outside of forcibly locking people in homes like they have done in Australia and New Zealand and China. Outside of that authoritarian, totalitarian approach, there is no way to stop the spread of COVID-19. Mask mandates, lockdowns, everything. You look at the curves, makes no difference whatsoever. And I think people make arguments that you can, but you look at it, it doesn't matter, because the amount of lockdown and prevention you actually have to do to stop it is not something we can do in most governments in this world, because it requires a totalitarian, authoritarian approach that most people find obnoxious, and it also would be crippling to your economy. Links to Dr. Graham's book will be found at theparadox.com/143. You can also find links to the other shows that we've done, previous episodes, as he's now the 5-time and easily the most frequent guest on the show, just because his insights are so good. They're not one-sided in that he doesn't care which camp you're on. He just tells you what's going to happen, and everything he's talked about has happened, outside of a few minor details, which we'll talk about today. But I think you'll find the conversation really interesting, super knowledgeable. This is the kind of thing you want to make sure you share with your friends. I mean, if there's only one episode you share with the Paradox, this is the episode to share, because it really just lays out everything that's happened, everything that's going to happen, and just what sort of policies we need going forward. Well, with that out of the way, time for a sponsor for the show. Vive Funds is a commercial multifamily real estate firm trusted by physician investors, physician families, and busy entrepreneurs from all over the U.S. Located in Dallas, Texas, and founded by Vina Jetty, Vive Funds specializes in curating conservative passive real estate investment opportunities for investors. Vina brings a dynamic perspective to targeting, acquiring, managing, and operating investment assets using the best time-tested practices combined with cutting-edge technologies. Reach out to Vina and her team at Vive Funds to find out how you can be a successful investor too by creating opportunities for you to build your portfolio. You can find them at drpodcastnetwork.com/Vive Funds. That's VIVEFUNDS. Again, that's drpodcastnetwork.com/Vive Funds. Again, the success of the show is totally dependent on how you've been sharing it with your friends, families, colleagues, and I deeply appreciate that. If you've not yet subscribed to the show, please hit that subscribe button on whatever podcast player you use. If you want to leave a review, I'd love it. Leave a 5-star review is always the best. And a written review is even better, so people know exactly what they're getting into. So again, please share the show. Please enjoy this show. And this is one I think that really encapsulates all that's going on with COVID. And as much as we all hate talking about it, we also can't help but talk about it, right? Because it affects our lives, no matter who we are, where we are, what our plans are for traveling or living or working or schooling, right? So without further ado, we were so right about COVID with Dr. David Graham. Enjoy. Hey everybody, this is Eric here with definitely the most frequent guest I've had, my friend Dr. David Graham. We went to high school together. He's an infectious disease doc out in Billings, Montana. And he's also the author and the creator of FIphysician.com, where he talks about financial independence for physicians. And at some point we actually need to talk about that. But you know, what has been dominating news for the last 18 months and what I've had you on initially for back in April of 2020, way back in episode 86, is SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19. I try not to talk about it all the time. It's hard not to in the hospital setting. I don't know if it's like that with you, but pretty much that's what anyone wants to talk about, either the virus or, you know, what the rules are going to be and those sorts of things. What's it like out in Billings? Because, I mean, in Grand Rapids, that's kind of all we talk about in the hospital.
Yeah, well, you guys had the alpha spike, didn't you, there in Michigan? And most of the rest of the country missed out on it, which was funny. But we're in the middle of a delta spike right now. Not quite like it is in the South, but you know, we're up to 40-ish per 100,000, and the hospitals are pretty full. You know, they've quadrupled from where we were at our baseline. So it's delta. It's delta all over. It's COVID all over, Eric. We missed it, didn't we?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's, well, it never went away, right? I mean, at least whether you're talking about the actual virus or just the policy that's left in its wake, right? Even when it's not real active in your community, it is always there because you get the sniffles. Well, now you got to get a COVID test to go back to work or whatever. It's always present at some low level in your life, whether you like it or not, even if you're in medicine or not.
Well, when do you think folks are going to figure out that it's never going away?
Well, that's funny. So I think let's go back in the Wayback Machine. So I was going to title this show, and I'm going to say we because I was smart enough to have you on and certainly with you, the foundation that you provided with sort of the historical, I guess, evidence for this coronavirus. It's really given a good roadmap of what's going to happen and where we're going. I mean, everything we talked about back in April. So it was April 28th, I think, of 2020 that I had you on, episode 86. All these, of course, will be linked at the show notes at theparadox.com/143. But we talked about this virus and where we thought it was going to go. And it has mapped out almost exactly to what you predicted. I mean, so you wrote a book, which I actually narrated, which I'd highly recommend, the audiobook, if you don't want to read the actual book, if reading's too tough for you. But it's called From Killer to Common Cold, Herd Protection in the Transitional Phase of COVID-19. You can get that at Amazon. There'll be a link for that also in the show notes. But it lays out your vision for what this was going to be. And I mean, I guess why don't you just go give a little recap where we thought back in April, and then I'll kind of talk about things we got right and wrong, because there were some things we didn't get right.
Well, and that's honestly that's why I wrote the book. Way back in April, we kind of knew how this thing would end, but no one was talking about it. No one was talking about what we needed to do now, knowing how this was going to end. And it really has been this chase around, looking at your hands 2 inches from your face over the last 18 months that has been the predominant policy of COVID-19. And, we're chasing after cases when we know we need cases. Okay, people need to get this virus. If they're not going to get vaccinated, they're going to get the virus. So they might as well get the virus now. And oh, by the way, they're going to get it again. So, the whole policy that has been presented of preventing cases is futile, because, what do you get? You get a spike later then, right? So way back from, you remember the Wayback Machine of flattening the curve, right? Yeah. The whole idea there was to, maintain hospital capacity. And then the question that people weren't asking is what happened after that, right? Well, then there's another curve to bend and another curve to bend. So the book starts with the scientific idea that there are criteria for eradication. There's 3 of them. And, SARS-CoV-2 meets 0 of the 3 criteria for eradication. Yeah. Right. So we were hemming and hawing, is it truly in animals, right? So is there a reservoir species? And we're pretty convinced now there is a reservoir species, or 2 or 3 or 4, right? Yeah. So, and then there is no effective, that's the other thing we learned from Delta. There is no effective prevention for this, right? There's a lot of breakthrough cases. So we knew immunity would probably wane to this, Eric. And, lo and behold, both natural immunity and vaccine-induced immunity does wane to it, right? So there is a reservoir species. There's no effective preventative measure. And then the third criteria is there has to be an emphasis in the world to vaccinate everyone. And how well is that going for us so far?
Well, there is an emphasis, sort of, right? I mean, there's definitely a push, but that's about the extent of it. Yeah. So.
Right. And I think isn't 2% of the world been vaccinated so far, compared to
I think
the
that's
rich
probably
parts of the country.
I think you're right. I think, you look at some places in Africa, it's less than 1%. Lots of the Western world is anywhere upwards of 50% or so, maybe, in the ones that have more vaccine access than others. But you even look at Europe, and there's lots of countries that are under that. Yeah. I think that and we were talking before we came on, is the most frustrating thing about this for me has been the fact that I feel like back in April, and I don't want to take anything away from us, but I mean, I consider myself, I'm not a genius. I don't think you're a genius either. I mean, you're a smart guy and you're reflective, and that's probably the advantage you have, and that you're not forced to sort of make decisions, right? Like, you're not a policymaker, which maybe helps in some respects, because you can sit back and sort of think about it. And you also don't have a drive to produce papers and academic studies and things like that. And so I think it gives you the ability to sort of just sit back and think about, really big picture and not worry about it. You're also not an author. Feel like you have to be writing all the time, in the sense, so all those things, that people who sort of figure these things out, they all have sort of weaknesses. But I think the fact that, you have some knowledge, obviously, infectious disease, so you're able to look at historically, and it allows you to get a big picture. And what I feel like I'm watching all the time on Twitter and Facebook, and I'm on those in order to kind of get show ideas. And so I feel forced to engage. And of course, in the OR, I have to. But I feel like there are 2 camps right now, generally speaking, who are vocal. You have the people who are running around with their hair on fire, who look and see a giant forest fire, and they don't know what to do, and they just are running in circles, trying to do everything they can. Then you have a smaller proportion of people who have their backs turned to the forest fire and watching these people run around like maniacs, and like, you guys are idiots, there's nothing going on, right? But I feel like, what you need to do is have someone just get on an airplane and kind of look down and like, okay, so there's what we have. Let's figure out what we can and what we can't do. What's reasonable, what's unreasonable. But we don't have we don't have anyone who's sort of like looking at policy in that way. And that's, I think, the greatest detriment. And maybe that's our system or whatever, the culture, I don't know. But that seems to be the overriding problem we have with trying to approach COVID for the last 18 months.
So whose job is that, Eric?
Yeah, well, I mean, you would expect that someone who is a public health expert, someone who is in charge of the public health response, they're the person you'd expect to be the one to be reflective and say, okay, so this is all that's going on. What can we actually do? What's the historical evidence can we use to guide our decisions? What sort of strategies do we know that work? That's the person you'd lean on in order to, and they would also have, information on the ground. So for instance, like, what's going on in the hospitals and, what are they talking about with clinicians? That's the person who I think policymakers would be they'd be the ones they'd be leaning on.
So essentially you're saying it's the CDC's job to do this, but I am not a person that believes that there are conspiracies in the world. I am not a conspiracy theorist.
Yes.
But one has to wonder what the heck is going on with the CDC. I mean, what the quality of decisions they have made time and time again are so horrific that I almost believe there is a conspiracy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's some quote like, don't assume malfeasance when you can just assume incompetence.
But here's the thing, Eric, there's a lot of smart people at the CDC. They have to know better. So, so the first thing I say to people is that it's the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. It's not the Center of Common Sense. It's not the Center of balancing, risks and benefits. Yeah. It's the Center to Control Disease. But they have been absurdly wrong about so many things that you just have to wonder. I mean, it has to be a political agenda or a conspiracy. I mean, maybe I am a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah. I think the easy answer for that is, so I don't think it's a conspiracy personally. I tend not to think there's malfeasance in large organizations that are, aside from the general sort of bureaucratic drift of any organization to enhance its authority and power and influence. That's sort of every organization, whether it's a business or government agency. I don't think they're any different. And even people are like that too, right? So I think it's sort of the same sort of motivations. But I would say probably it is people who, within any organization, you have all kinds of pressures on you. And I think with the CDC, they are a public institution that have significant political pressure. And you have people who are put into positions of power or influence who are not put into those positions of influence for certain skill sets. And so, if you're a really good accountant, you might find a job at the IRS, but if suddenly you're given the job to lead the IRS, you're not specially qualified for that job. You may not be very good at it, right? If there's suddenly a crisis, right? You may make bad decisions. You may say, someone comes to your office and say, we need to audit these people. You're like, well, I guess, I just know how to do numbers, right? And I think a lot of those people at the CDC who get rise to prominence are very good politically in the sense that they know how to advance a career, write papers and those sorts of things, but they're not very good in messaging, in looking at diseases overall, like, new pandemics, right?
Well, so like someone who is good at this, Fauci, like his most recent statements is that once we get 95% of the people vaccinated, this will go away by the spring. How absurd is that? Do you think we're going to get 95% of the people vaccinated, first of all? And then even if we do, it's not going to be gone by the spring. So he is a smart enough guy to understand that this won't be eradicated. So why does he say absurd things like we're going to vaccinate most of the people, which clearly isn't going to happen in the United States, and then that it will be gone? Why? They are smart enough to know this is not going to be eradicated. So what is the agenda that lets them not count natural infections? You have to get vaccinated. It doesn't matter if you've been infected before, you have to get vaccinated. These things that are truly anti-science, let alone the position they're taking on masking. They don't talk about the quality of masks at all. And that's super important. So let's go ahead and give people the wrong message about masking, such that we can get this masquerade, this mask theater of compliance. So, it just blows my mind. And I try not to be critical of the CDC, but I don't know how you can't.
Yeah, well, I absolutely. And I think Fauci has failed in so many ways. You're right. And that they've been wrong about so much. And I think people will push back and say, well, they're doing the best they can. It's a new pandemic, whatever. And I think those are valid. But, initially when things happen, no one really knows what's going on. No one knows how SARS-CoV-2 is transmitted. There are all sorts of unknowns. And I think we recognize that and you give someone grace for not knowing those things because they can't be known. Right. And so he's like, okay, we don't know if it's animal reservoir, where this is, how this thing operates. But it was pretty clear by summer. Again, you had written all this stuff down in your book and you had figured out exactly what's going on with SARS-CoV-2.
Yep. And it's the 1 year anniversary of my book. So I think this is a good time to look back and look at the things we got wrong too. So I'd be interested in your take
Okay.
in what is
So
wrong in the book.
I would say most of the things that are wrong are things that are very minor technical points. So for instance, there were no animal reservoirs. Well, at the time he wrote the book, there were no known animal reservoirs. And so when we talk about that, that just means basically that it's possible that this virus goes to an animal species.
And I think I commented on that. And I said, I hope that these animals were dead end hosts rather than reservoirs. So I think we did know at the time that there were definitely animals getting infected with this.
Right.
But then I think the evidence is still pretty poor on transmission. I mean, it transmits from minks, but like, the house cats and zoo cats and stuff like that. I don't know. But frankly, we don't even need a reservoir because, human immunity isn't permanent. So that's why we don't even need a reservoir to make this non-eradicatable.
Yeah. And to your point, I mean, I think that you had made the point, and I think very accurately, that even if there wasn't an animal reservoir, it was so ubiquitous in the world, and it was so contagious. And that was even before these more contagious, varieties, which is what we expected and anticipated to happen anyway, that it was going to be endemic, which means it's going to be around forever. Now I think, we can be totally convinced because we're looking at the state of Michigan here, and 60% of our deer have had SARS-CoV-2. And
seriously?
Yeah. And right. So, and actually most of the deer in the Northeast have had that as well. So we have, and we know mice can have it. It's interesting thought experiment, like how deer get SARS-CoV-2 because they're not ever close to humans. I mean, they get pretty friendly around here, but I suspect they're by mice, and mice give it to a deer. And, it obviously shows that there's outdoor spread of this virus. And anyway, it's very interesting, but it just goes to the point that that's the case. All right. The other thing I would say is we thought there was a vaccine that was going to be developed. It happened, and I don't remember if you had the time in there, but certainly when we were talking initially, we thought it'd be much longer, and we thought it'd be 1.5 to 2 years before we got a vaccine developed. And we had a vaccine in under a year, basically, that we're putting in people's arms. And so that was something we got wrong. I think it was also far more effective than we initially thought it would be too. I think, we thought they would really struggle to even get 70% efficacy, and it was well over 90%, which is pretty miraculous. I mean, it's quite a technological development. And so that was wrong.
Yeah. Let me comment on that real quick, because I think that's huge, Eric. Like the amazing efficacy of this vaccination took us all by surprise, because we were thinking this was pre-mRNA, pre-adenovirus technology when, for SARS and for MERS, the vaccines were really crappy. So, we were thinking that it might be disease modifying if it was a good vaccine. And instead, it's almost 100% disease modifying, right? There's just the folks out there who are immunosuppressed who, need a third dose, not a booster, but a third dose to really kind of get their immune system primed to this. But that there was such an amazing, effective vaccine so early, blew my mind.
That is definitely one of the biggest developments, I think, of this whole thing, but that kind of leads into the next thing. So I guess that the key thing that you had to have recognized early, and you by everybody, right, the world, is that this was going to be a virus that was going to be around forever. It was never going away. If we look at other coronaviruses, and this is well said in your book, and I'd recommend anyone get the book just to read. It's a quick read, and it really gives you a good history of the virus and of coronaviruses and sort of how they mutate and all those sorts of things too. But also that people will get this. You'll get it multiple times in your lifetime. The likelihood is it's going to become less dangerous to you and end up in the ICU and get less sick. So if that's the case, then you have to make your plans accordingly. And to your point earlier, once you set in mind that that's what's going to happen, meaning everybody's going to get this. And so the only thing that you can do to mitigate risk is to say, well, if everyone's vaccinated at first, that they're less likely to end up in the hospital or as sick. And so maybe you hold off as much as you can and you try and flatten the curve and try to prevent these infections from happening later. But as we stand now, we're obviously at the point where we have vaccines for those who want it outside of very small children who we know are incredibly low risk for significant disease, to the point where it's almost a statistical impossibility. I mean, for the most part, I know some of my pediatrician friends won't like me saying that, but that is absolutely the case, right? We have 500,000+ people die in this country, and less than 500 are, I mean, let's not even like what, 0.1% or something. So if you go with, if you come with it from that angle that everyone's going to get it, then I think it totally changes the way you look at this, right? I mean, you stop trying, like you said, you stop trying to maniacally try and prevent outbreaks and spreads of this disease because you're just stopping what's going to happen anyway.
Right. So what are we waiting for at this point? Why are we trying still to mitigate this? I mean, we gave up on containment, but we're still trying to mitigate and suppress this. So what are we gaining by this? More people are getting vaccinated every day. That's true. That's good. Hopefully by December-ish, we'll have the vaccine for kids 6 and up that choose to get it. So, but frankly, you're right. I mean, I don't care how many cases there are because it doesn't really matter anymore. Certainly when we stress out our healthcare capacity, as we're doing this summer, that's worrisome. But, frankly, my hospital is always at capacity this time of year. We're always on divert this time of year. Yeah, and I don't think that story has made it to the popular press, is that there's probably whole states that are on divert during the summer because, hospitals like making money. I don't know if you know that, Eric, but the healthcare system likes making a ton of money, and that means, no open beds, right?
I mean, hotels would rather have their rooms full than the rooms empty. And a hospital is just a hotel for sick people.
Yeah. And so, and then the other major thing I think I struck out on is the variants. So I was under the idea that this is an mRNA virus. I'm sorry.
mRNA virus.
An RNA virus. Yeah, an RNA virus, and it wouldn't mutate all that much. So I thought there would be, this strain fighting with this strain, and there'd be all these strains, and they'd kind of duke it out to see which would be the most successful. Instead, we had these lock stock switches to alpha and then to delta. And right now, delta, like 100% of the cases in the United States are delta. And that happened in the course of 2 months, that it just out-competed every other strain of the virus. And I honestly didn't foresee that happening. So I thought this virus would evolve to be more benign. And then I couched that in the terms of it could be an actual change in the virus, or it could be due to human immunity. And it seems like that's what we're seeing, is that hopefully by the 3rd or 4th time you get this virus, your immune system controls it and it's just a common cold. So, but that said, the milieu, the environment that makes Delta so successful is not going to be the environment of the future after everyone's already had the vaccine or the virus, right? So we're going to have a different strain that probably outcompetes Delta once we get closer to 90, 95, 100% immunity, which won't be vaccine immunity, obviously, but will be vaccine and immunity from natural infection. So, wait for the next strain to come by. The next variant's going to start this spring probably, right? It won't go away. It'll be a new strain.
Well, you're certainly seeing, because of so little of the world has had this. I mean, in some respects, we think a third of the United States Americans have had it, maybe 40% at most. Actually, people with immunity is probably 75% maybe Americans, because not kids have had it. But anyway, most of the world is not like that because they have no vaccinations. And so you're going to absolutely have more of these strains show up. And to the point earlier, I mean, they're still going to, even though you're vaccinated, you're still going to get infected. And the virus, although will have less time probably in your body, it will still have the opportunity to mutate. Or probably a better way of putting it is that the ones that are more likely to transfer from person to person are going to be more fit and more likely to spread, and that you will get epsilon and, eta and theta and all the other strains that are going to be better at transmitting from person to person.
Right. That are better at transmitting in hosts that have partial protective immunity against coronavirus, against COVID. So that'll be the strain.
Yeah. I think I'm encouraged, at least, maybe encouraged is the wrong word, but I think I'm happy that at least when you look at Delta, it is definitely more contagious and more infectious. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And clearly because it's more fit and it wipes out all the previous variants, but it also is it doesn't make people any more sick than the previous variant. If anything, maybe it's a little bit more mild. It's kind of hard to say. I mean, you look at the stats in Europe and the UK, they say, well, they don't have more kids in the hospital with Miss C or anything like that. Maybe a little bit less for people getting hospitalized with it. Hard to say, but it's certainly not becoming like a super more deadly bug, which is what you'd worry. Like it's more contagious and it's more dangerous. That would be, a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and you hope that whatever is required of the next strain does allow it to be slightly more benign in the host as well. But that's going to be whenever there are challenges, a virus often gives up its ability. So we see this with HIV, right? The wild type virus is usually the most fit virus, and so in environments where you're giving them medications, the wild type doesn't survive because of the medications, but then as soon as you stop the medications, the wild type outcompetes it again too. So, we will see with more immune people with immunity out there, we'll see different strains with hopefully different severity to them too, and hopefully less severe.
Yeah. So I think when you're looking at things right now, I feel like at this point we have to accept the fact that everyone's going to get it, and if everyone's going to get it, we have to just have that policy. And I think this is where there's the disconnect right now in this country. I don't think that the understanding that it's going to happen to you is in any. We'll separate the country into two camps. Those who are like totally obsessed by COVID and think it's like Ebola, and it's, if you get it, your chance to get in the hospital is 50, 60%. It's killing people left and right. And you have people who deny the fact that it's even a problem. I've got a strong immune system. I don't need to worry about this, or whatever their story is, and that it's something totally to discount and not even to pay any attention to. And then plenty of people in that camp believe they can just avoid getting it by like avoiding those, whatever situations or places where they think that, it's a conspiracy. It doesn't really exist. But we don't have anyone just saying, hey, we're all going to get it. It's okay. You're almost for sure going to be okay. It'll kind of suck. That's why you should get vaccinated first, so that it'll suck a little bit less probably. But that's pretty much like all we can offer. But there are too many people who are in the camp that they can prevent this, to get some immunity level, like you said, with vaccination rate of 99%, 100%, whatever, that it will prevent it from ever spreading and being around. It's going to be like polio, where we just wipe it out. It's going to be gone, or measles, mumps, and rubella, right? Those are pretty much beaten viruses. Now, I say beaten, it's because we continue to vaccinate. But if we stop vaccinating, we see that they come back. And so that would be sort of like this, I guess, in some ways.
Yeah. And also the vaccines there offer a better chance at more permanent immunity, and immune system doesn't wane as much. So what percent of doctors do you think, Eric, actually understand that everyone's going to get COVID?
Well, I can only a very small sampling of people I talk to online, or I talk to in the OR, and I would say that there is it's
still a minority. Isn't it?
I think it's less than 50%. I think there are people, if there are a number of them who believe that people will get it only because they've just sort of given up hope that we can contain it, because people are doing the wrong thing. They're not masking properly. They're not, distancing, or they're not doing whatever. And that's the reason. That's,
right.
Our leaders aren't willing to do what it takes to stop it spread or whatever. I mean, there are plenty of those people.
If only we could shut down the country again, we'd be able to get rid of it.
If we all just died, it'd go away tomorrow, right? I mean, which is true. Not actually now the deer.
If I wore a hanky over my nose, it might go away, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think most physicians don't. And I think this is a part of the problem with just the problem I mentioned at the beginning, where I think people just aren't willing to take a step back and sort of reflect on what, where you're going. And this is the problem. If you don't really have an idea where you're going, or what, where the end point is going to be, you can't craft reasonable policy. Like I would ask you.
We're back to the beginning again, aren't we?
Yeah. I think when it comes to the vaccine passports, which I think these are a great example of I think bad policy in the sense of this. So we've accepted right now in this country, I think even people who are very big advocates of vaccine, that vaccines don't prevent you from getting infected and potentially spreading to other people. And now they're talking about boosters, or as you'd say, a third dose, however you want to look at it.
Well, they're talking about boosters too.
Well, boosters, right? Yeah.
Right. The third dose is for the immunosuppressed. The boosters are for the people that had an adequate response, but it waned, so that they need a boost.
Right. And
so it's different in theory.
Yes. Although in some ways you could say, well, you should always have a 3 vaccine schedule, and so it wouldn't technically be considered a booster. But whatever. It's semantics, right? It doesn't matter. But so I just don't know. I don't know how we get to where we need to go until people accept the fact that you're going to get this. And we have too many people who are just committed to stopping the spread. I mean, our community here, it's a big, huge thing with schools opening, right? And this is not unique to Michigan. This is everywhere, where there's a fanatical move to control and prevent people from getting other people sick from COVID. Like what is the point if you have, for a quarantine for COVID, for instance, what is the point of doing a quarantine in the school? If someone, your classmate got COVID and now, well, Johnny, you're not vaccinated, so you have to stay home for 10 days or something like that because you may have gotten it. It's reasonable, assumption that you've got it. But what does that actually accomplish? It's similar to the vaccine passport. When you have the vaccine, we know it doesn't stop everyone. So why do I care if you've been vaccinated or not? It doesn't, because we know everybody potentially could spread it to you, maybe some at less effectiveness than others if they're vaccinated. But even if 100% are vaccinated, a vaccine passport doesn't assure safety. I mean, that's presumably why you have the passport, right? So you say, well, these are safe people. But we see that they're not.
Right. Yeah, and the vaccine passport harkens back to the quality of the recommendations for CDC. Let's get real risky here and talk about masking in schools. So here we are putting kids together in a room for 6 hours, and we're giving them a mask that might give them 2 minutes to 30 minutes of added protection if they actually wore the mask. So we're not giving them N95s or KN95s, which gives them hours and hours of protection. So we think that this is really going to make a difference in kids, and it's not at all. So again, it's getting to the idea that, kids are going to get this. They're going to get infected, if not now, then when? When's a better time for kids to get this infection?
The only argument you would say for that is you'd say, well, if you prevented them from getting sick for a little while, they have an option to get the vaccine first, right? But again, I think it's pretty clear that, I don't know. I mean, whether a kid gets a vaccine or not, yes, they're going to less likely to end up in the hospital, I suppose, but the chances are so small. It seems like it's the amount of the safety, not the safety profile, but the benefit you get from that cost of delaying it just doesn't seem like it's really maybe worth it.
Yeah. Well, and let me back up for a second. I want to make it clear that I actually support masking in schools, because the schools will get blamed for everything. So even though kids are hanging out after school, they're having parties and such. If kids start getting this, the schools are going to be blamed for this, right? So I really think, it's a tough situation schools are in, but you have to have mandatory masking in schools, because otherwise they're going to be blamed. At least this way they can say, well, we did everything we could. We did everything possible. So I feel for people on both sides of this aisle, it's probably not going to make a difference, but we got to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's a bad reason to do anything, right? Like, just because, well, we're doing everything we can, don't just stand there, do something, even though what you're doing is completely pointless, right? You look at other countries in the world. I mean, like Europe, UK, they don't mask their kids in schools at all, or even the teachers, right?
Right.
Because for the same reason you point out that it's unlikely to make any difference when you have these people in a closed space. If it's there, it's going to get there or whatever. And even you look at mask mandates, and there's a couple states in Germany where they actually mandated N95 masks for everybody. And it made no difference with the spread of the virus within the community. Now, it maybe because people don't know how to wear them, whatever. But if you have a policy, I think it's incumbent on you to recognize it has to encounter the real world. And if it's not going to work in the real world, well, then no matter how brilliant you think it is, it just isn't working. So it doesn't matter. It's a lot of expense and hassle, and there's the cost to that.
So, but by not talking about the quality of mask, we're actually hurting people.
Yeah,
what we're telling people is we're saying, if you are worried about it, then wear a crappy mask. We shouldn't be saying that. We should be saying, if you're worried about it, then take the time to actually wear a quality N95 mask. So then the people that are worried about it could actually take adequate protection of themselves, because the people that aren't going to listen to you and aren't going to mask, it doesn't matter what you say, they're just not going to do it. So I think it's really, this is just my 2 cents, but we've tried it the old fashioned way and it doesn't work. So this is the definition of insanity, right? We keep trying something and it doesn't work.
That's like, oh, it's coming back, let's have another lockdown or mask mandate. And we've seen they don't work. I mean, you look at states where they have different policies, and you can argue, well, some are rural and some are urban, and that's true. But in general, there's no difference. When you look regionally in timing, or you can't make any sort of correlation. And people who try and imagine that these are effective measures, I don't know what they're looking at. I mean, I know these are epidemiologists. They're not for one thing, they're not physicians, so they're not treating patients. These are MPHs or, maybe PhDs, not taking anything away from them because they know statistics way better than I do and sort of modeling. But I don't know how you can look at this. I've talked to a number of epidemiologists and they're sort of like, it's crazy. They don't know why people think that these measures work. And if you look at the masks, to your point, with bad masks, it doesn't make any scientific sense that they would work either. Like, so there's no reason to look at and say, well, this is a good effective measure. And to put them on just so that you provide political cover for the schools, which is kind of your argument, that you don't want schools to be blamed for something that they're not at fault of. I mean, they're at fault of the fact that kids are gathered there, but it's not their fault that kids gather there because that's sort of what they do. But it's nothing because that they're doing wrong. It's just the fact that that's just, human interactions, right?
Yeah. This is why I call it mask theater. It's about compliance. It's not about effectiveness. And then getting back to your point about vaccination in kids, that's also a tough issue. So, I mean, I know you got young kids, Eric. Are you vaccinating them?
So my kids aren't that young in the sense that I'd say I've got a 19-year-old and she got vaccinated because she had never had SARS-CoV-2. We have a 15-year-old and he wanted to get vaccinated, and my wife is an advocate for vaccines in general as a pediatrician. And so it seemed very reasonable. And so he got vaccinated. We have actually another kid in our house who's immunocompromised. He had a solid organ transplant. And so he's also had a third dose. And the nature of our family, in the sense, we're just kind of introverted people. So we're not social butterflies. And so I think, if anyone's going to last a long time without getting SARS-CoV-2, it'd be someone like us because we just aren't out and about. But we do, our foster son goes to work and stuff. And so he's around people and, you can't not be around people. But that's why we all managed to not have it before we got vaccinated. I mean, so none of us have had it that I'm aware of. And so anyway, I mean, at some point I'll get it, I'm sure. But so that's our standpoint. And if I had an 8-year-old, I'm not sure. I mean, my guess is with my wife, we probably would vaccinate the child. But I don't know that I would feel that strongly about it. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I got a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the 6-year-old, he's old enough that we can ask him, do you want to get the vaccine for the virus? And he knows what a shot is. He hates shots and he wants to get this vaccine. So I'm happy to do that. And then, I got 3-year-old twins and boy, if there was a vaccine available for 3-year-olds, that would take a lot of thinking, wouldn't it? So, because it is a benign illness, it's an illness that essentially doesn't really affect very young children. And, that could be my chapter on the black box. Why do kids of a certain age just not get coronavirus? It's not even COVID, but coronaviruses in general. So I don't know that we really understand that yet, that there is some sort of inherent non-susceptibility that kids have towards coronaviruses in general. And that would be fascinating to understand. It's deeper than just maternal antibodies, IgG transplacental and IgA via the breast milk. It's somewhere between 6 months and 2 years of age. There's just a paucity of cases. So, why is that? What explains that? So I think that's another fascinating thing that we haven't really figured out yet.
Yeah. I mean, my wife would say, well, she's definitely seen babies now with SARS-CoV-2, it comes positive swabs, and she's seen kids, and her opinion, anecdotally, of course, is that Delta has changed things in the sense that more kids are symptomatic and she's seen more infections. Is it because we're testing more? Is it because kids are a little more symptomatic with this variant? Hard to say. I know people have postulated that with the decreased amount of ACE receptors they have, that perhaps that makes them a little bit less susceptible to this virus, which relies on that to gain access to your cells. I don't know.
Yeah, or is it just a denominator issue? Kids get sick, say 1 out of 10,000 times. If you only have 10,000 cases, you're going to have one kid sick. But with Delta, you have 100,000 cases, so you got 10 kids sick. So it's just the number of cases we're seeing is why we're seeing more cases of pediatric COVID.
Yeah.
Which we need to be explicit, Eric. It happens, right? Kids die from this. They get MIS-C. But again, that's going to happen now. It's going to happen a year from now. So if we're not going to vaccinate these kids, then they might as well just get it.
Yeah. Well, and as we're recording this, it's August 25th. The FDA just approved the vaccine for over 15. So I think it's like for 16 and above, it's authorized. The Pfizer vaccine They still extended the EUA for the 12 to 15-year-olds, so that's not been approved technically.
Right. And then they wanted to double the research participants in the 6 to 12-year-old group. So why did the FDA go back and ask Pfizer and Moderna to double the size of those groups?
Yeah. I mean, I have my theories. And I mean, I guess, so when I saw that they were asking to double the sample size, that was, I think, late last week. My assumption was, well, it's one of two things. One is they didn't see efficacy. So they found that perhaps the groups were not in areas where high COVID. If that was the case, then maybe they didn't see enough difference between kids who were vaccinated versus kids who weren't. That was possible. I thought that was less likely. My assumption is that they found that there was one or two adverse events that they were concerned about, particularly myocarditis, and that they had a kid or two, maybe three, I don't know, who got myocarditis, and so they're questioning the dosing perhaps, or the timing of doses, and they wanted to get a larger sample size to make sure that this was not something that was more prevalent, because it's always the tricky thing with any sort of study, as you know, is if you have a small number and get a rare event, well, is it a rare event or was it something that's common now with this? And if you want to do a study to say, what's the likelihood of getting some super rare event, you may have to find 1 million people in order to get, the two. And maybe you did a sample of 2,000 and you got those two people in that sample of 2,000. Maybe it was a 1 in a million thing. Or maybe it really is more common, right? You just need to have larger sample size to make sure it doesn't repeat. I mean, that's my assumption. And also my other evidence for that, before I let you respond, is that the AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics, is very much pro-vaccine, obviously. They're very much in favor of masking and all the other sort of measures which, are controversial. But anyway, as far as with other countries in the WHO, but that they were urging the FDA to speed up this approval process so they could start vaccinating these kids, because there were a lot of pediatricians who wanted to, once there's an approval, that they would go ahead and off-label, which means before there's explicit approval for pediatrics, to actually give the vaccine. This is very common. It's not like some crazy thing that these pediatricians are asking to do, but they don't do that for things that are not fully approved. And so a lot of pediatricians are pushing for that.
It's very common for medicines. It's not common for vaccines.
Yeah, my wife said they have done it for some vaccines, that it has happened, and I can't remember which one, but she said it has happened. And but anyway, the interesting thing is that as soon as the FDA said we're increasing the sample size, and the order saying that we're approving the vaccine, that the AAP came up very quickly with a statement saying they do not advise any of their pediatricians to do off-label use of these vaccines, which means, in my opinion, that they were told by the FDA that the reason they're expanding the sample size is because there is some sort of reaction. Now, it doesn't mean these vaccines are dangerous. People don't like take all this out of context, but it's entirely possible they saw some reactions and they were a little concerned, and they want to make sure that they're more comfortable with an approval if they come up with one. And the last thing you want to do is say, yep, go ahead, when you maybe have some concerns, and then the AAP just goes ahead, blasts ahead, and tells other pediatricians to give it. You give a bunch of it, and then you have some problems, because there have been vaccines that have caused problems. Rotavirus was the most recent one where it caused intussusception in infants, which can be, can kill kids and causes, bowel problems, and so surgeries. And so anyway, that's my guess for what's going on, but also that it's not going to be publicized, because they also don't want people to freak out, because we are in that environment where before you've got your results, you want to make sure you got everything together before you release them, because otherwise people are just going to freak out, and then it'd be really hard to convince people to take the vaccine.
And then I wonder, are they still doing like a 3 to 4 week interval between the shots? Because that made sense perhaps early on when we were just trying to jab the vaccine in as many arms as possible. But, from a science standpoint, only waiting 3 to 4 weeks between doses doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think there are multiple questions right there. I think my guess is it's because there's an adverse event, but it could be that they're looking at different dosing regimens, like, spacing apart. And then I think probably the actual size of the dosing. I mean, that'd be my guess. But probably it's because there's an adverse event more than anything. And maybe they're also maybe they have a couple different arms with different timing, because now at this point you can get them, as frequently as you want. Before we go, I want to ask you one more question. And since you're infectious disease, I'm sure you've been asked a few times about COVID in the last year and a half. When it comes to treatment, there are lots of people. I've not had anyone on to talk about outpatient therapy and or inpatient therapy, really, partly because I'm not that interested in it, because it's just not what I do. It's not my wheelhouse. And I don't think it's particularly interesting for most people who listen to the show who are just kind of looking for general information. I mean, we've definitely had studies about dexamethasone. We've got ideas in ventilation strategies. But there are a lot of people purporting to have outpatient therapies, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, whatever it might be. I guess I did an episode on vitamin D, but I think it's a little bit different. That's sort of general health and not just specifically COVID. I think it's interesting, and I don't think we came up with significant, proposals for what you should do. But when it comes to outpatient therapy, what are you doing? What do you suggest? What's the literature say at this point? Or do you think these people are kind of cranks, which is kind of what I feel like, that they are sort of, if I say, well, I treat 10,000 people for COVID and not a single one ended up in the hospital, like, well, maybe they're all like 40 years old. And then I could treat 10,000 people with a glass of lemonade and I cured them all from COVID. I kept them out of the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of issues to unpack there. One of my more favorite stories in the recent time is a doctor brought me this meta-analysis from, a semi-respectable journal, but it was on ivermectin. And, they have the error bars, and like literally every study they reviewed was way past the error bars showing the effectiveness of ivermectin, for prevention and the inpatient and the, outpatient and the ventilated. And, when have you ever seen a meta-analysis that looked like that? Never. That's not how studies work, that everyone would support just massive use of ivermectin. So, was that study recalled? I can't even remember, but there is no effective outpatient medicine for COVID. And I think that's going to be the way it is. So, even like for the common cold, I think we've had one medicine approved, maybe plecanaril historically. But the problem is with these respiratory viruses, the cure is worse than the disease, right? So viruses live in our cells. In order to kill the virus, we have to kill the cells. So what can we give to someone with mild illness? By definition, they're outpatient, so they're not, moderate to severe. So what can we give someone with moderate illness that won't, bother them? And then, I hope drug companies are smart enough to realize that this market's going to go away in a couple of years, and it's not worth spending a lot of money on treatment of COVID when it's not going to be relevant to treat it. So, and, honestly, that brings up a lot of frustration, or issues of frustration among healthcare providers right now, Eric, because, fundamentally and frankly, this is a vaccine preventable illness, right? It's not a vaccine preventable infection, but we can prevent most severe cases of this. And the folks we're taking care of in the hospital right now, for the most part are not vaccinated. And that's, it's pissing us off. Folks, get your act together, get the vaccine. We're sick of taking care of people that won't take care of themselves. But honestly, if we didn't have smokers and overweight, poor diet folks in healthcare, what would we do? This is a ill care system, not a healthcare system, right?
Yeah. Well, no question. I've talked to Dr. Jason Fung, and he points out with obesity, for instance, and then the insulin resistance that probably contributes to a lot of our cancer, right? So like oncologists are in business because people are just too heavy, and those, all these other problems. And so I understand physicians and nurses' frustration with people who come in who don't take precautions like, get vaccinated when it would help. Recognizing though too, that people are always making decisions that you may not agree with and it may not be good to their health. Yes. And the argument like, well, it's contagious and they can get other people sick. Yes. Except the fact that everybody's going to get this, right? Like if there's some chance of them, because they're not vaccinated, they're going to spread it to people who ordinarily would have gotten sick because they would have made it through this pandemic without getting COVID. Well, we just know that's, I don't know how you can look around the environment right now and figure out that that's not where we're going to end up. I don't understand. It's the same reason I have the same frustration with the passport system. I just don't understand the point of it, because I don't know what you're trying to accomplish. And I think there's so many measures we do that you could be a conspiracy theorist and say, well, it's because they want control. They want to be able to control your movements. But it causes so much inequity and causes so much rancor. And when it'd be simpler just to say, hey, you're all going to get this. You're probably going to be okay. You're going to feel terrible for a while. You might lose your sense of smell. Get vaccinated. That seems like it would have been a much more effective message than just this total hysteria that's been going on for the last year and a half. I can't handle it sometimes because it's just like people just not making any sense. And people who know better, like you said, the CDC, et cetera.
So here, let's leave it at this. Get your third vaccine and then just forget COVID even exists in this world. How about that? Move on.
I can't, because you know why? I got to wear a mask every time I walk around the hospital. Right. And it's, people laugh and they say, well, you wear a mask all the time in the hospital. And yes, it is absolutely true. I wear a mask in the OR. And no, I don't wear a mask in the OR to prevent myself from getting aerosolized viruses. I wear a mask in the OR because I don't get splattered with body blood fluid, right?
Right.
Or maybe that I cough or sneeze on the patient. That's the only infection control that we've got going on in the hospital. It's the only thing that makes any sense. I mean, someone had TB coming to the OR. I'm not like, well, I got a surgical mask on, I'm totally safe, right? You'd say, yeah, you got to have an N95 or something like that. But I don't, not seeing faces, there are two things. One is, I don't know what anyone looks like. And it's kind of funny, except it's been now a year and a half, and I've had a number of new physicians who work with my group. I've never actually seen them. I've never seen new nurses.
Right.
And to not see someone's face, that's actually a real thing. Like, that's part of being human, is actually seeing the full human. I mean, I don't see them naked, obviously, but just like their face. And so you don't really, it does not have the same social interaction, right? And so that is a cost of living that is not, especially with one that is accomplishing nothing, that's why if it was actually doing something, I'd be okay with it. And the other part is, I think having people wearing masks all the time contributes to a level of hysteria or anxiety. Maybe anxiety is a better word. A level of anxiety and fear that is within a community. And then, because they know something's wrong, something's up, someone's potentially a danger, a threat to them, when they're not, right? I mean, yes, we all carry all kinds of things in our bodies that can get people sick. But we've decided as a species that we are worth far more to each other together than we are apart, right? I mean, that is the nature of humanity. And to take that away from people, I think is, it is unhealthy. And I think I would even say immoral. I mean, I think it's, unethical, unless you feel like you're doing something that is going to significantly change the course of where we're going to end up. That I think it is too high a cost to pay. And that's why I think of it in schools. I think it's really a travesty because you have these kids living in fear and anxiety. My wife sees it all the time in a peds practice. I mean, she'd say, well, their kids have anxiety all the time too. And that's true. But I think that is a cost that is hard to put a price tag on it or whatever, but that is real. And if we're not actually doing, if it's not, is it worth it? And I would say it is absolutely not, because we need each other more than we are better apart.
So in my book, I made the prediction that healthcare workers would be wearing N95 masks for the rest of my career. So I'm wrong about that N95 part, but thank
heavens,
do you think you're going to wear a mask for the rest of your career? And maybe that's why you need to retire with me come April 1st, 2022, Eric.
I would say if I'm forced to wear a mask forever, I will probably retire. I mean, to not ever see anyone ever again, it's, as long as you feel like it's temporary. I really think that my feeling is at some point, we're going to recognize that we're going to have this, that everyone's going to get it. There's nothing you can do, and just accept the fact that people are going to get it. I cannot imagine that we're going to be testing pre-surgically COVID-19 statuses for the next 20 years. It doesn't seem possible.
Now remember, Eric, you're talking about the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, not the Center of Common Sense here.
I understand, but, and maybe people are going to always choose to be afraid of this virus. But I mean, I think the only way I'll be wearing a mask forever is if we're going to treat this COVID-19 as the be-all end-all virus for all time. Now, you may come back and say, well, it'll be a new virus in 5 years, and then we'll reenact all these things, maybe. But I think at some point this will have to, it just has to burn itself out as far as the public. Once everyone's gotten it, they're like, okay, we've all had it. So now we can all right, well, maybe everyone's had it one and a half times. They're like, okay, I guess we're all right.
Well, and see if this makes sense to you. We have people that use intravenous drugs. So we actually do needle exchange programs to reduce their risk. And we have people that have unsafe sex, and we give out condoms for that so that they can have safer sex. So this is the idea of not absolute no harm, but of risk reduction. And I need and want the CDC to get to the point where they treat us as adults and allow us to reduce our risk appropriately. Not that I'm planning on having unsafe sex or intravenous drug use, but if I don't want to wear a damn mask, I'm not going to wear a damn mask. I understand the risks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm at that point right now. I mean, if you're a business or something and you're insisting on me wearing a mask, I will not enter your premises. And maybe it's a ridiculous sort of, I mean, I suppose I'll have to get on an airplane to go to Florida in the fall. But I mean, outside of where it's a true necessity, I will do everything in my power to avoid it, because it's just inhumane. And again, if I thought it was actually doing something, I would have no problem doing it. But when it's like telling me to wear a pumpkin on my head, or like people say, everyone should wear pumpkins on their head, and kids don't mind. You tell them to wear a pumpkin on their head, they wear a pumpkins on their head. The problem is
just as protective too, right?
Right. Well, pretty much.
Mask
and the problem is,
well.
Kids are, kids are really adaptive. They'll do whatever. People say, well, after a few months, like, I'm kind of surprised my kid's okay wearing a mask everywhere because that's what everyone is doing. But that doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. And so I think we need to actually ask ourselves, what are we doing? And I think it starts with the fact that to the point of your book, which is From Killer Common Cold, Herd Protection Transition Phase of COVID-19. The point of that book is it's going to be endemic. We're all going to get it. We're going to get it multiple times, depending how long you're going to be on this, spinning planet. And so we just need to understand that and not live in fear.
And you and I knew that 18 months ago. Hopefully the CDC will figure it out at some point.
It has slowly made me even more and more insane, especially as these other mandates go out, because you see people writing articles about like, oh, we're going to have it forever. Like, well, okay, if you agree that that's going to happen, then why are you doing these things? They're just like, well, it's just the thing we should be doing because other people are doing, other countries. I don't know. Well, anyway, thanks for the conversation. It's been 18 months. Well, probably, about 16, 17 months since we spoke first about this. We'll definitely have to have a session with you talking about retiring, since you're going to be retiring in less than a year now. Pretty exciting. Since I consider you young, since I consider myself young. So
I'm happy to do it. So we'll go out strong, right? Go out when you're young.
Absolutely. Well, if anyone has any more curiosity about this, I encourage them to go to fiphysician.com. Check out the website, theparadox.com/143. There you get show notes from this and all the other episodes we've done. And really, I guess maybe you should just start with your prognostication. You should really stop with COVID, because you've pretty much been Nostradamus here. You've got about everything totally right. And I look like a genius all the time when I'm talking to people, because everything that's happened, I've sort of predicted, like it's happened exactly the way I thought it was. So anyway, thanks for that. And hopefully our audience knows this and shares it with other people, because I think this is a message that needs to be heard. And the more people hear it, the better.
Great, Eric. Thanks so much.
Get another great show with Dr. David Graham. Before we end, just a quick reminder about our sponsor, Vive Funds. Vive Funds provides unique, passive, multifamily investment opportunities that they vet and bring to you as an investor. Reach out to Vina Jetty to see how partnering with Vive can help you reach your real estate investment goals at drpodcastnetwork.com/Vive Funds.
Thanks for listening to The Paradox. If you like what the doc is doing, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher. And share the show with your friends. Become a supporting listener to get access to special bonuses at patreon.com/theparadox. Show notes can be found at theparadox.com.